Thanks for joining us this morning as we compare the movies of the Dune franchise, otherwise known as
The spice must flow.
Yes. This Friday is the second half of the Warner Brothers theatrical rendition of the book Dune, and it will hit the theaters. We wanted to give you something to talk about if you're running into people that see this movie or this comes up in conversation, give you a little bit more substance to be able to either defend or share your faith with this one. But wait, there's more. This Thursday, we're going to have a bonus live stream on Dune. And then this Friday, we're going to have this Saturday, we're also going to look at. So this Thursday, usually we talk about theology on Thursday, but we're going to look at Islam versus the Dune Fremen religion. Some people might say, well, that's Ben Sunni. Why didn't you say it was Ben Sunni? Because they alter it. They have their own nuance to it. They have their own flavor to it. But we're going to compare that to Islam and see, okay, what similarities are there? What differences are there? It really has at least a feel of being Arabic or Islamic because of the depiction in the movies. And so we're going to look at that a little bit deeper and say, what are the similarities and what are the differences? And then on Saturday, we're going to be coming fresh from the theater and do a review on Dune Part 2. This is the new release coming out this Friday, and want to give you our take on it for what it's worth. But before we get started, please like and subscribe. It helps make these videos available to more people. So we took a poll and we asked the question, which version of Dune do you think is the best? The 1984 Dune movie directed by David Lynch, the 2000s Frank Herbert's Dune released on the SciFi channel, the 2001, 2004 Dune movies directed by Denis Villeneuve, or the book only. And you can see by far, the current movies hit the top. So this was close to 100 respondents. And I think it's probably a pretty good cross-section, at least for the people who responded here, to say that, hey, this is what they want. This is what they like the best. So in general, what was, and without spoilers, what was your, because we're going to get into a spoiler section later, but in general, which did you like the best, the book or any of the movies?
Normally the books are pretty good, and the first movie they always come out with based upon the book is normally the best. And then they try to do the remakes, and it's like, you guys are just sort of trying to redo this what was already good once upon a time. Just trying to remake it. Actually, I think they did a good job on the later ones. I would actually agree with the poll as being the later one actually is much better, in my opinion, so far. Again, we've only had part one. We'll see later this week what part two gives us. Hopefully they stick to it and stay with the book and present something good, or they don't. And there's some variants from the book and definitely some variants from the original movie, because the original movie added its own stuff to it as well.
And we're going to get into that here. We're going to have a spoiler section. I would think that most people would have already seen this book. The spoiler section is not for the 1984 version, but for the more recent 2001 version, or just the book in general. If you haven't read it, we let you know, say, hey, going forward from this point on, we'll have the spoiler marker to let you know that, hey, might spoil it for you. So I would agree with you that in general, the newer version is good. And I would also agree with so many reboots being done recently. It's like, come on, guys, really?
I should have a decent reboot for once.
Yeah, it's nice. I mean, I haven't seen it, so I shouldn't complain about it. But Quantum Leap, you think, really?
That's not really a reboot. It's a continuation.
That's right.
Allegedly, that was I haven't seen it, but it's supposed to be a continuation. I don't have an issue with the continuation concepts.
Yeah.
I have more of an issue of rebooting everything changing a lot of the stuff, definitely genders, skin color to make it fit whatever ideologies you want to put forward, and then rebranding it as the same exact thing and be like, no.
Yeah, I heard that they were, and I don't know if this is true or not, but they were going to reboot or redo The Mask after Jim. I don't know if anybody can do better than Jim Carrey's performance. I mean,
they should have learned from Aladdin. I mean, Aladdin, the reboot of Aladdin had some issues, but I think one of the major faults, of course, was not having Robin Williams.
Oh,
because
yeah.
you didn't have the option of it, and trying to replace him. And it's like, no, I wouldn't. There's some, if I was an actor, there's some roles you should never touch. And if it was done that well, no, don't touch it, because you'll just look like an imposter.
Right.
Definitely because he passed away. Then you look like you're trying to outdo someone who is already dead. You're trying to undo their legacy. And that's even if that's not your intent, it could look that way.
Right. Well, Deneville's adaptation, I believe, is closer. Now, that's the most previous version of Dune. I believe it's also closer to the text and a better theatrical representation overall, at least the first part. We haven't seen the second part, so the jury's out on that. It's a better adaptation, although I did like the aesthetics of the 1984 version of Dune to a point, other than the Harkonnens and Aaliyah's representation.
She's creepy as all get out.
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh,
creepy demon possessed chick.
I know, she's like dancing around with the knife at the end. It's like, but there's also a personal reason why I like the 1984 David Lynch's version of it, because, and I'll share that on Saturday. So going forward from here, we have a spoiler alert. If you're not familiar with this story, Dune, I encourage you, and if you're planning on watching it or reading the book, you may want to bow out now and go do that. Now, again, we're not suggesting that you do either. Not suggesting, this is not a recommended book, although it is very well written. To the most part, the book is for science fiction. It's well written in terms of depth, world building. It's on the level of Lord of the Rings for that. But there's also some very slow parts.
Extremely slow parts, definitely at the beginning.
In the movie.
Bad pacing.
It doesn't go by today's standards. If you were to write a book like this today, it would generally be rejected to say, no, the pacing is too off. They'd probably say, I don't feel empathy for the main character. Different things like that would not be taken for. In fact, he had a very hard time getting it published the first time around. So I can imagine what it would be like today. I've compared Dune with Lord of the Rings, but before we go any further, I do want to say that we did give an overview of the political structure of the Dune universe, which is necessary to understand the story. And that video is right here. If you go check it out, a previous video. Also, we do have another video comparing the Lord of the Rings to Dune, the Dune universe. And that video is right here. So both of those are good references for that. Actually, I think that's probably the same video. So the first half of Frank Herbert's Dune, what is it all about? In the year 10,191, the human species is spread across the universe. The noble house Atreides, led by Duke Leto Atreides, assumes control of the desert planet Arrakis, the only source of the valuable spice melange. They soon discover the stewardship of this planet is not a gift, but a trap planned by their rival House Harkonnen in alliance with the Emperor. Desiring to crush the Atreides once and for all, the Harkonnens and the Emperor's elite Sardaukar soldiers obliterate the Atreides and kill the Duke, Paul's father. Central to the story is Paul Atreides, who possesses remarkable abilities and grapples with his destiny. After the betrayal and sabotage, Paul and his mother, the Lady Jessica, escape into the unforgiving desert, the home of the monstrous sandworms. As Paul unlocks the secret of Arrakis, including his own prescient visions, Paul realizes his fate is intertwined with the planet's destiny. The first half ends with the hope of seeking justice with the help of indigenous desert people, the Fremen. So I'm going to check with the comments. We're going to look overall, and then I'm going to ask that we get that link up there for anybody who wants to jump on. This is I'm going to put this up here because I think this might be representative for some of the people that watch this. Sorry, I got nothing. Don't know Dune. Don't care about Dune. Just like I just like you guys.
Hey, well, at least there's a reason.
Well, yeah, and like I say, the main focus of this is just to give you the background and the understanding for this, just in case you come across somebody do it. I mean, it's almost like if we were to talk about other events, or maybe if there's something happening in sports that people are talking about a lot, but this would be, hey, here's the latest on this, give you some information. So it's something that you can discuss around the water cooler or talk to your friends or neighbors about, and then see where it goes from there. So limitations. There's a couple of, before we get into comparing these two movies, and yes, there was the 2000 version of Dune that was a miniseries that came out on SciFi. We're not going to really be looking at that. We're going to be comparing the David Lynch version of 1984 to the current version that's come out now. But some things we need to take a look at first before we delve into it too far. First is, it's an alien world. How do you show the rules of a world that is so far removed from ours that it almost becomes alien? So there's some things that are common to both movies, and there's things that are distinct to one or the other. The common points to both movies are Paul uses audio-visual teaching film called a film book to learn about Dune. And this gives an opportunity for the director to say, hey, this is a strange place. You've never been here before. This universe has different rules from what you're used to. There's politics. There's all sorts of stuff that's going on. Let me tell you what's going on first before you really dive in there. And so he uses this film book to describe the sandworms, the spice, and other things like that.
Info dump.
Kind of.
Through a storytelling.
It is, because it is fitting, because you have a young guy, supposed to be like 16 or so, going from one planet, going to a new world. And he needs to find out about it. So he's sitting down, he's learning. And you as the viewer also get a chance to learn. So I really call this an info dump. An info dump technically would be, and I'm glad you asked this, because this is something I need to point out. An info dump is a term that's used for, like, Bob, the reason why we're here is because the big strike that's going on, and the big strike between these two groups, and the owner of the company, Vladimir Harkonnen, really does not like us. And so you do all this stuff. It's like, if you have two people that are in that situation, they're not going to be talking like that. Stilted dialogue, and it's unreal. But Paul is still learning, and so we learn as he would. And we also see him learning, like you see a knife fight with him in the Shield with Gurney Halleck. And in both movies, they demonstrate how the shields work with this knife fight that's going on between them. And the shield is a technology that's necessary as a plot device with the rest of the program to see, or the rest of the story to show you what's happening there. So, but unique in the 1984 version is expanded on voiceover for inner thoughts. They would Paul might be sitting there and saying, you just see him thinking in the back. There's so much thought that's done in the book. How do you bring that out to the movie? And so he might be sitting there. In the 1984 version, it would be like, I must find a way out of this. I'm going to Arrakis. It's a deadly planet, and they have sandworms, and they can kill me. So there's a lot of this voiceover that's going there. That's used, but it really comes off as exposition sometimes. Some people found it very annoying. Some people, my wife, for one, found it a way to ground herself in the story. And when she watched the latest version, she was a little bit, even though she was familiar with the story, she would be a little bit more lost than maybe watching the first one. What was your opinion about the voiceovers that were
I'm
there?
glad they dropped it. I think it's a poor way of doing it.
Okay.
I find it distracting.
But it'd be interesting to talk to somebody who had just seen the latest movie, 2021 version, were they lost because there wasn't as much detail that was given.
Unfortunately, the inner thoughts that are given a lot of times, it's a question of if you're doing a storytelling, is it first person, is it third person? If it's first person, sure, you can do the inner thoughts, you can do that sort of stuff. But the movie itself is, by just how it is third person. So you're mixing the two,
right,
whenever you do that. And I find it to be jarring.
Okay. The 2001 version relied on showing rather than telling. For example, the first scene with Paul and his mother at the dinner table did a great job of showing the voice. There was a technique that Bene Gesserit used to control people, and an introduction to the Bene Gesserits and Paul's relationship to his mother. Even though these two ways give backstory, Paul's prescient visions were hard to distinguish from current time. He has these visions of the future, and sometimes they flash back and forth, especially in the 2004 version. I find myself going like, wait a minute, is this actually happening? Because they kind of fast forward a little bit in the movie, or is this present tense? I found that, was that an issue with you and watching the movie at all? Okay.
But then again, I'm very familiar with it.
Familiar with the story. Yeah, that's the key. If somebody is not familiar, then it might be an issue. The second limitation in comparing these two movies is we're only dealing with the first half here.
Yeah.
On the second one. So that limits the comparison between the two just to the first half of 1984. But this also means that the latest Dune has more time to tell the story. It was over 2 hours, the latest movie. So it gives you a chance to give more details, characters and intrigue can be deepened. And so it's kind of unfair to compare the two movies in that regard because you have more time to do what you want with this. Third thing is special effects that we have to consider when comparing the two movies. The special effects, yes, that is the name for it. It's not CGI in 1984. It's not computer-generated graphics. There are the David Lynch version is really rough. But it was fairly good at the time.
And there's a bit that's charming with it nowadays. You get more of a retro feel to some of these.
Yeah.
That it's a charming, that's cool. They were able to do that without CGI, because we're so overwhelmed by CGI. We have most of our movies are completely CGI, or at least like 80 to 90% in some cases CGI.
Right.
And then to have something that's completely not is kind of cool, kind of retro for it.
Okay.
So
yeah. And there is how about the knife scene between the two?
You mean the two blocks versus actual? I like the newer one more.
Well, okay. So they have these shields, and they'll because there's assassination attempts all the time with these different houses. They'll go after each other. And here you have an ability to be able to prevent assassins. It's any faster. You can't shoot in each other. These shields would prevent fast projectile weapons. So what they do is they slow things down. And if you go slow enough through the shield, you can penetrate it. Like with a knife, if you just go the right speed, you can get through. And that's why knife fights are preferred over gunfights, because the shields are being used. And so they tried to show this in the 84 version. It was a labor of love to put this together. It took a lot of work without CGI. And here is an example. This is Paul inside the shield. And these square blocky things. It looks more like, my daughter said it looked like Minecraft fights with these blocky guys coming together, and it's so blurred and everything, it's difficult to see. But you get the idea of a shield there. You compare that to the newer version, and the shield hugs, and it's like vibratory and only clicks on so much. When you hit fast, it's blue, and when you start to go slow through, it's red. It's, I think, probably a much better representation.
I think so.
Of what the original intent was. So, but we should probably be a little fair with them, because consider what was cutting edge in 1984. I mean, we have 1984. Sorry. This was the personal computer in 1984. The IBM AT and the Apple Macintosh with 128K RAM. Now, in comparison, a high-end gaming laptop today costs half as much as this Apple Macintosh and has 250,000 times the memory. In 1984, Microsoft introduced MS-DOS, and the 3.5-inch floppy diskette was introduced and became an industry standard. And in 1984, this was your phone. It was not in the back of your pocket. You never asked anybody, "Hey, where's my phone?" Dummy, it's connected to the wall. You know where your phone is. I don't have to call your phone for you to find it. You know where it is. And these were the movies that came out later that year. So Dune came out with these and competed with them. This is the 1984 version of Dune. So yes, it's dated. And when we see the knife fight duel between Gurney Halleck and Paul, it made them look like Minecraft characters, and it was a labor of love at the time. We at least need to give these guys kudos for the extra work and effort that they put into it. And one last thing is a comparison between the two. This is not special effects. This guy really did have hair back then. So now that we've
shade there.
What's that?
Some shade around that one. Okay.
Yeah.
Those in glass houses should throw stones.
Hey. It's I'm saying goodbye, but it's still there. So we've leveled the playing field a bit, but it's let's compare the two movies based on other aspects other than, hey, it's really dated and things like that. The differences in the 1984 film, the Spacing Guild wants Paul killed. So they got in there and they told the Emperor, kill Paul Atreides. Not so much in the next book. We don't see that. The only ones really conspiring for the death of Paul and the House Atreides itself is who?
The Harkonnen.
And the Emperor. Right. Those are the ones conspiring.
They streamlined it.
Yeah. So the Duke is building an army using a new technology called weirding weapons. They're sonic weapons. And thoughts, they say, have a sound, and that sound has motion. And that was kind of like the idea behind it. This is not in the book. What they did is they took the idea of the Bene Gesserit method of martial arts, and they converted instead to this weapon. They said, use this weapon instead. It looks more high-tech.
More sci-fi.
Yes, more sci-fi, more high-tech. And they use these sonic weapons instead to introduce. It's totally new, not in the book, not in the new movie, to blast and to fight the enemy. Instead, they're using desert power in this. They're using the Fremen totally just with their own, plus teaching the Fremen basically some of the Bene Gesserit tricks with the weirding way. So I'm going to check the comments real quick to see if we have Gurney specifically reading a butchered biblical verse, reciting a butchered biblical verse. I'm wondering which one that is. They had what they called the Orange Catholic Bible, where they kind of took all the religions of the world and put them in a blender, mixed it in, took out God, and then spewed it out to say, hey, humans by themselves are wonderful. Let's just have peace, kumbaya, and everything, and forget about all the things that contradict all these religions. We just have this new thing that we're going to follow. And so that's where that came from. If you happen to know what that verse is, I'd appreciate it. The differences with the 2021 film, there's a sweeping, beautiful cinematography that's done in here. It's just pleasing to watch, and it's not overdone with CGI either. Did you get the feel that
not really overly done?
Now they did
a lot, but it didn't feel like it was overwhelming.
It wasn't the centerpiece. Some of the more recent MCU movies, it's like, okay, it seems like it's almost a central focus. With this, it's more window dressing. It's the frame of the picture is what CGI is in this movie, I believe. And the worms in this were CGI.
Well, yeah.
The sandworms in the original were not. No, they were miniatures. And from what I understand, even one of the worms that they use in the miniature, they say miniature, but they're still good size sets. One of the worms they used in the 1984 version was 20 feet long. So good size.
Quite big.
Good size. Paul is younger in this version too, in the latest one. And we see him become a man. Now, this is closer to the book. I think he was about 16 in the book versus you look at the 84 version and he looks like he's in his 20s. You don't get that sense of a child becoming a man, but you do, I believe, in this latest film. Would you agree that that's there?
So far, yeah, but again, we're only part one.
Yeah, just talking about part one. Yes.
Most of that development should happen in part two.
Right. So
at least most of the fulfillment of that development.
Yes. So we have Paul and his he has his close relationship with Duncan Idaho, this sword master, and Paul shows that he's taken Duncan into his confidence. And one of the first scenes with him is rather touching. Duncan Idaho is played by Jason Momoa, and Paul shows his trust of Duncan. He says, "Do you, I can, you can always trust me," is what Duncan says. And Duncan turns around and squeezes Paul's arm and says, "Oh, getting a little muscle?" Paul says, "Really?" Duncan says, No. See you in Arrakis, boy. So there's this good banter back and forth with them, and you see he's really a mentor. Paul has all these great mentors that he's with, and this is one thing I think we're missing in our society now, that young men, specifically men, lacking mentorship, lacking that type of older person, not necessarily an old man, but an older man bringing younger men up, giving them the proper training. We also see this with Paul's father, the Duke. The two of them get together, and Leto says things like, "I want you to sit on my council to learn what I do." There's this real connection between father and son, more so than I think is actually in the book too. I think it's more of a stoic approach in the book, where here you do see the tight bonding between father and son. I think it's a real strength in the movie.
I think it definitely played off of the characters more in the newer movie than the older one or the book did. Because you definitely see, if we're just comparing the two movies together, even the reason why the Atreides was going to take Arrakis is different between the two movies. In the first movie, it is from the Emperor's point of view, and he says, "Don't worry," he's talking to the Harkonnen, "he'll take it because of the power that it will grant him and his family." So it was a power grab. In the newest movie, they show up there and say, "Hey, you guys need to take this planet." And the Duke says, "We help anyone that asks, basically. If there's a call for help, we will respond. So we will do this out of a sense of duty, a sense of honor, a sense of helping people out, more than just personal."
Yeah, and I don't know if that might be something that deviates from the book too, because one of the main things that Frank Herbert shows or wants to show is the corruption of power, and that power corrupts And absolute power corrupts absolutely. Is that you do have these people, even the Atreides, which were the good guys. There's gray morality throughout, and I think that was, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong on here, but I think that is not as in the movie. It shows that less in the most recent movie.
Recent movie, yes, it's definitely more that they are the good guys,
right?
And they have good characteristics. Where in the original movie and in the book, they're a lot more gray. They're a lot harder. To be honest with you, they're a lot harder to root for.
Yeah, and they're more exploitive. They come to Arrakis to use Arrakis. In the most recent movie, there's like, hey, we want to work with the Fremen. We want to learn from you and things like that. It's a different take. So another thing that was different was the highliners, the guild highliners that are used. And I don't know if you saw this or not, but if you look through these in the movie, in the most recent one, it looks like it's more like a portal from one location to another. You see another planet when you look through the center part of the highliner, as opposed to you go in this cylindrical bus and basically it will transport you from point A to point B because the navigators are folding space. We also have a clearer picture of what the Bene Gesserits want in the most recent version. A lot more screen time is given to Lady Jessica in this, and we see her character develop a lot more. A clearer picture is given that they note that they had to do this to give what is the name of the test that they have? He put his hand in the box.
Talking about the Golem Jabbar test?
Well, yeah, they have the Golem Jabbar needle, but that's basically it's a test to see if he's an animal or if he's human, which I don't really understand too much because I know a lot of people that pull their hand up a box if it was on flame. But here's he puts his hand to the box, they hold the needle there, but they give the reason for that. And she says, we had to do this because you hold too much power. You inherited 2 birthrights, both from as a duke's son, as a great house, and inherited from his mother as being a Bene Gesserit. From what I understand, his mother was not supposed to teach Paul the Bene Gesserit ways, and they thought, wow, this is a real violation of what we wanted. Lady Jessica also said that she manipulated the Bene Gesserit manipulated the bloodlines to get a mind that can bend, so powerful it can bend space and time for a better future. She says explicitly what their goals were. You don't have that in the 84 movie. You don't really know what the Bene Gesserits are doing other than they're manipulative in the shadows somehow. And the Harkonnen are evil beyond imagination in both movies, but where they were just disgusting in the earlier film, they possess a darker, more menacing dread in this one, especially the Baron.
I think that's much better. I prefer that portrayal. I think that's a much better way of showing them.
Yeah.
Than just the disgusting, just raunchy sort of betrayal that just like, turns your stomach.
Yeah. There were some parts of the first one. It's just like, I don't even know if I want to watch this. And even the second one, there's some parts that's, it's pretty bad. This is not a movie for kids. So just let you know that there's some pretty fast-paced action scenes in this, but yeah, there's some really dark spots with the Harkonnen. Christian themes. Even though Frank Herbert was not a Christian, there are several themes and motifs that Dune that resonates with Christian beliefs and practices. But it's important to note that Dune is a work of science fiction and incorporates a wide range of influences and ideas from various cultures and traditions. The presence of Christian themes in the first half of the book may be incidental or reflective of the broader human archetypes of telling stories. Nevertheless, here's what I found. We can point out some Christian themes, and these are points of discussion that you can have with some people. The first one is rivals. Such a common theme in almost all stories, but this one has a twist. The conflict between House Atreides and House Harkonnen can be interpreted as a struggle between good and evil forces. The Atreides, who represent justice, honor, and nobility, are pitted against the Harkonnens, who embody greed, cruelty, and tyranny. This dichotomy echoes the Christian themes of moral struggle and the battle between light and darkness, except that in this world of Dune, this is shaded by a gray morality. And that's the twist. Power corrupts, and even though it corrupts Paul, we don't see this in the first half, but we see it in the second half. This is the author's warning. Religion is nothing more than a political tool wielded by those in power to control the masses. Now, I would agree that in general, religion is, and Christianity can be used that way, but true religion, true Christianity is not. It is something entirely different beyond the machinations of people. So I would agree that a godless or false god religion does this, but a true relationship with the creator is something entirely different. And this is something that would be a really good talking point. Someone would accuse you and say, hey, you know, your religion is nothing more than a tool used by as a political power. You say, well, not really. And you talk about your personal relationship.
Yeah, it counts on how you're looking at it. Because if you're looking at it just saying from a secular standpoint, there is no God, so you're really just using this to expand your own power. You're really just using this to browbeat anyone you don't like into being it. You're just using this in order to justify your own hatred against whatever insert group here that they perceive you speaking something that might not be accepted necessarily by everyone. So that, if you're looking at it from that point of view, then they would just claim that you're basically just using this for power. If you're actually looking at it from a God-fearing perspective, though, that whole absolute power corrupts absolutely doesn't apply to you because you don't have absolute power. And that's part of acknowledging that God is above you.
Yeah, Jesus said,
you're submitting to God.
If you lose your life for his sake, you will gain it. And if you try to grab a hold of it that way, you're going to lose it.
Yeah. So you're even like King David, any of the kings in the Old Testament that were God-fearing, realize that they are not the absolute power. They have to be held accountable to God himself. And that's where that comes in, that fear of accountability to someone above you. And when you have no accountability is where the corruption really seeps in.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the sad things about Frank Herbert too. And I'll probably get some flack for saying this for someone who is a secularist who doesn't believe in God. Frank Herbert, without God, you're left with not a whole lot. It's just the human race. Try to expand as much as you do, try to maybe do as much good as you can, but it ends up looking like this dark universe that we have pictured in Dune. And when you try to do this, the best you have is expanding the human minds, expanding the human possibility, thinking independently. And that was probably one of the key messages that the author of this book really wanted to convey, is that don't be trapped by other people's thinking. Don't be subjugated to them, but free your mind and find your own way. Well, the problem with that is that you forsake the wisdom of ages when you do that too. That there are so many other people that went before you that maybe there are some better ways. They worked it out yourself. You don't have to go out and reinvent the wheel. And without God, this is it. This life you have, it all ends. It's meaningless. The human race on the larger scale, a blip on the radar in the entire age of the universe. That's it. And it ends up being meaningless. And that's where we get the book of Ecclesiastes from. It's all meaningless without God. It goes nowhere. The second theme that we can see here is sacrifice and redemption. And this is another common theme seen in most stories. But throughout this story, characters such as Duke Leto, Atreides, and Lady Jessica, pictured here, make sacrifices for the greater good of their family and their cause, especially shown, like you said, in this movie versus the previous movie and even the book. they are more giving. And you can really hold on to this. So you can say, okay, this is a noble characteristic. This is good. This is something that we can fight for and we can believe in. Their willingness to endure suffering and hardship reflects the themes of sacrifice and redemption often associated with Christian teachings. But the morally great question here is, what is the greater cause, this greater good that the Atreides are looking for? In this movie, it's like, hey, let's work together with the Fremen. In the book, what would you say would be the motive of the Atreides?
Pursuit of power, being able to establish. It counts on which individual you're looking at. Paul would be pursuit of power eventually to make sure for revenge against the Harkonnen.
Yes.
Where Leto was more of trying to defend his family. There's still that revenge against the Harkonnen. That has been there since the beginning. It really is rooted in each of their characters in the book.
Yeah.
Where you have that revenge. We got to get revenge. Even his dad's death was related to a Harkonnen assassination attempt.
You're talking about Leto's father.
Yes, Leto's father.
With the bull. With the bullfight. Yeah. That was in a prequel book. Was that House Atreides?
I think so.
I think it was House Atreides when they did that. It's a separate book. But yeah, it gives a further backstory about that. The next theme would be the father and son relationship. Now, this is seen in a lot of other movies too, but it's really key to the latest portrayal in this movie. There's missing so much in our society now. And we see the deep love and relationship between Father Duke Leto and his son Paul. Leto said, "A great man does not seek to lead; he is called to it." And he answers. Great line, great line. There's some really good advice that Leto gives his son. And he also at one point says, "We will teach. Come and join me in this meeting. We're going to have this strategic meeting." And he invites him in, and he brings him in with all these other mentors and stuff. And Paul takes a seat at this table with the others. Really great. Do we teach our boys how to fight?
No, we shouldn't before.
So it's almost a manly thing to say, do this. And when you say, well, you shouldn't teach violence and stuff like that. It should be taught in a way to be handled properly. That when threatened, if somebody's going to come in and attack your family, you as a father and a husband should defend your family. If you just sit there and let somebody do whatever, well, as far as I'm concerned, that's very dishonorable. And letting that happen, it's like, wow, you're not fulfilling your job. So we should teach our sons how to fight.
I think there's a great example. Actually, it's in a different series, a different show than this one, and actually Sliders, which we need to do a review on yet. There is one episode where you got these people traveling from world to world. One of these worlds is going slower than the others, so they end up back in time, where you have an older version of the main character meets the younger version. And during this time, the younger version is being bullied. He's being attacked at school. And the older version is teaching him how to fight. And everyone around him is like, no, don't teach him how to be violent. Violence is bad. Don't teach him how to do this. And the old ones, no, trust me. There's this fight coming up. It's really a bad one. He needs to know how to fight. It gets to the day of that actual fight, because he teaches them how to actually fight and handle himself in spite of all the naysaying from his companions. Well, you get to the day of, and the older him explains that in the original story, the main bully that he's going to go up against, he went up and basically broke his kneecaps with a bat. Because he did not have the knowledge or the capability of controlling himself. He went to the ultimate means in order to make sure. And basically he said that kid for the rest of his life walked with a limp because of the actions I took this day.
He went too far. So knowing what your limits were,
knowing how to handle yourself in a fight in that situation, where the younger him who was trained, was able to handle himself, fight, and there were no severe injuries. And there was no life-changing outcomes from that other than he's able to stand up and more confident for himself.
Okay.
Where in the original time story, not having the father teach him how to handle himself, not having that role, he went for the bat and broke the kid's kneecaps.
Ouch. Ouch.
So example of this. And I thought that was a really well way of handling that.
And I also just point out too that there's also a point I think we should teach our daughters how to defend themselves too. You know, they'll be attacked, they'll be alone, and you're not going to always be around to help protect them. So they also
proper defense,
right?
So they don't have to go for the ultimate means, or feel that they have no other option than to go to those and do something that everyone will regret.
Right. Right. The next theme would be, I don't have the thing for that. The next would be prophecy and destiny. The Bene Gesserit sisterhood's manipulation of the bloodlines and prophecies, as well as Paul's own journey of self-discovery and fulfillment of prophecy, parallel biblical themes of divine providence and fulfillment in God's plan for humanity. But the missing key here is the idea of prophecy. Was the Bene Gesserits use it as a way in their Missionario Projectiva to manipulate people into thinking a certain way. It was used as a political tool. It wasn't really real. The visions Paul and the Bene Gesserits have of the future, or Paul has present. I don't think the Bene Gesserits have. They hear the voices from the past. But Paul's visions of the future give him a glimpse on what's happening. And that's not really prophetic, so to speak. So what would you say is the difference between prophecies in Dune and prophecies in the Bible?
The prophecies in the Bible, and again, this is kind of in Dune in some ways. It is driven by God in an ultimate fashion. There's a reason and a purpose for each of them.
Right.
It's not some random, like, oh, I'm just giving you insights on what you're going to have for breakfast tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not getting a vision of you just sitting there eating. There's a purpose. There's a design to it. And even earlier when they're on Caladan, you do have Paul having visions of the future. The only question is, what is behind those visions? Why is he getting them? Because if it's a secular mindset that you're looking at this and there is no God, that this is just all made up, then these should just be random.
Right.
So, his mind's developing so he can see the future as well. Well,
what determines which events are he sees key events?
Who's determining those are key events?
Right. How is that done? Someone described it as it's like he's looking over a long distance and he sees hilltops. These are main events that come. He doesn't see the details in the valleys, but he only sees the highlights that are given there. But from the point randomness of the point from the universe, there are no particular highlights that are there. They are just all individual occurrences and events. Nothing is made more important than another. So how would that work out that way? And the answer is the God of Dune is Frank Herbert. As the author, he gets to choose what's there and what's not. So in that way, he is the God of prophecy. Frank Herbert is the God of prophecy there, whereas the Bible, the God of prophecy is God himself, the creator of the universe. So, and the other thing too is ultimately the prophecies in the Bible point towards our relationship with God. Prophets in the Old Testament had a twofold ministry. The first was pointing people back to God, and then foretelling the word of God, and then forthtelling what was to happen. Either, hey, you guys continue down this way, there's going to be disaster, and this is what's going to happen with the disaster. If you restore your relationship with God, these are the good things that are going to happen, and ultimately, God's going to restore our nation and restore all people under this future king, the Messiah. Now, that gets to number 5, the Messiah. The Messiah is a unlike the word prophecy, the word Messiah is distinctly borrowed from Judeo-Christian tradition. Now, the archetype of a Messiah is something that's kind of universal, but the name itself, Messiah, is from a Hebrew word. It means anointed. The idea was that a king, part of the process of crowning a king is that you would anoint that king with oil, the sacred oil, and that would be part of his being installed into service. And so when they're talking about a future king to restore Israel back to its former glory, this king would be the anointed one. We're talking about the restoration of the kingly relation, the kingly office, and he would be anointed with oil. He would be the anointed one, the Messiah, which is also where we get the word Christ from, which is the Greek translation for anointed. Think of Crisco oil, that type of thing. That's Christos is the oil that is used in anointing. So Jesus, the Christ, Jesus, the anointed one. It's not his second name, Jesus Christ. It was like the Christ family, Mr. Christ. Would you do this? No, it was more of an office. It was saying that he is the Messiah. So the idea of the Messiah in the Bible was restoring Israel, in a larger sense, restoring all humanity, not just on a national level, but on a spiritual level back to God, that we have a restored relationship with him. And so here's my question. How does Paul is the central figure in the Dune series. It is the term Messiah is used as a prophesied leader of hope for a cause, the Lisan al-Gaib in the Fremen language. That's their word for Messiah. Paul Atreides is the central character of Dune and can be seen as embodying aspects of the messianic archetype, in that he is going to lead these people back to a point of glory. And in this case, the Fremen were never in a seat of glory. They're never being restored. They're being brought up out of the desert. But he is this ideal character, this king, this person who is going to bring them to glory. How does Paul's Messiah, how does the Messiah of Paul contrast with the Messiah of Jesus?
Well, the Messiah of Jesus bring us back to that relationship with God, restoring us to what we unfortunately opted out of originally when we rebelled against God himself. And so he's restoring something that was once there. Paul, not so much. He's just taking people from the desert and conquering, trying to lead them to this utopia concept eventually, where his family starts trying to pursue this utopia for all mankind, regardless of the cost.
Oh, yeah. And that's where it gets out of hand, right?
Oh, yeah, very easily.
And this was Frank Herbert's warning to say, hey, don't follow messianic figures because they go nuts and people die. But so comparing the two, Paul and Jesus, like Jesus Christ, the Messiah, Paul is born into a noble lineage, but grows up in humble circumstances. He possesses an extraordinary ability and is destined to fulfill a great purpose, leading his people to freedom and salvation. And one of the mistakes that the Jews and even the Jesus disciples at the time made is believing that the Messiah was going to bring them to a political victory, overthrow the Roman government, and restore the physical kingdom of Israel. But under pressure from Pontius Pilate, Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. So there's a much larger, bigger picture than just a small national scope. This is a universal scope, and a much bigger division that Jesus was binding. He was bridging this division between God and man, not just the division of the kingship of Israel. So this is a point of real serious discussion that you can have with people concerning this, because Messiah is such a big concept in the Dune series. Dune Messiah is the next book. I think it might be the next book in the series. I had to go back and check. But it is a big concept within the Dune universe that you have this person that's elevated. And if it's godless, our fallen nature without God, this will bring people to destruction. That we need to look out for this. Even Jesus said, look out for people claiming to be Christ in the future. And he says, that's not true. They're not me. There's only one Christ, and that's Jesus. And note that Frank Herbert also borrowed other religious terms like jihad and water of life.
Now, by the way, you might have someone point out that in Islam, they also have the concept of Messiah. Jesus is also the Messiah in Islam. There's just no rhyme or reason why he is. It's just an empty sort of tag-on title.
Yeah, wouldn't it be for the restoration of Israel? That's for sure within Islamic thought, right? That they wouldn't want to.
Well, according to the Quran, Jews are supposed to control Israel. In fact, there's no indication in the Quran that the Jews were to lose Israel at all. In fact, it would imply that they keep it forever. Again, mind-boggling why they have an issue with that in the Middle East right now.
That's a good question. So, in conclusion, in the Dune universe, we are shown science fiction future with a religion that is more powerful than established governments, but as a religion of spiritism without God, of mysticism without love. In C.S. Lewis's The Screwtape Letters, the senior demon Screwtape expressed hope that demons will learn to manipulate human emotions and mythologize scientific knowledge so that it could lead humans to indirectly adopt beliefs and practices that serve demonic ends while remaining closed to their belief in God. This, Screwtape said, was their goal, the materialist magician who would worship natural forces without acknowledging spiritual realities, without acknowledging God. So, coming up next, we have, on Thursday, we're going to dive deeper into Islam versus the Fremen religion in Dune. And then Saturday, look at our take on part 2 of Dune, fresh from the theater. So until then, we've enjoyed our discussion together, and we will see you next time.